everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Well, first off, Happy New Year, everyone. Demetrius and I took a little break, so we didn't start off in the very beginning of the year because we just need a little time to kind of get things together. But we're very excited to kick off season 5 of the podcast. Woohoo! I can't believe we have been chugging along for so long. We have a fun season ahead of us, and we're excited to get started again. Before we jump into our topic of the day, let's talk about how season 5 will be different. We're going to continue our weekly drill down on current topics as much as we can because we listened to what you, the listeners, wanted, and we did it, and the numbers have been increasing again. So it's made us really happy, and I feel like it's always a win-win if our listeners are getting what they want. We did not have as many guests last season because we wanted to test this new format. And so far, it's been very successful. So we will be weaving in some guests again this season, as some of you have requested, and having really, really interesting topics to discuss that maybe aren't necessarily exactly what's in the news at the moment, but things that we should be thinking about, especially as 2022 unfolds. Let's just get started. So good morning, Dee. How are you doing? And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm excited to get into some things. CES wrapped up not too long ago, and we have some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it was a shorter event this year. It was actually a 2 to 3 day event, and we didn't attend this year. We kept close connection with it, and we definitely reviewed all the products that were being shown that we thought were interesting. But due to COVID, the attendance was limited, and it really didn't make sense for us to go. A lot of times, Demetrius and I would go because we wanted to connect with clients. This is our chance to have dinner with them. Also, our chance to review new products and kind of see what's unfolding for the year. Our joke between Dee and I is like CES is not really about what's happening that year. It's kind of what is happening a little bit of last year and a little bit of this year, because a lot of the stuff that's going to show up at CES is usually dropped into the news at some point between, I don't know, like August and September of the previous year. So you kind of get a little bit of a hint into what's happening. But it was pretty exciting this year. There was actually some really interesting stuff that was shown that really piqued my interest, and it kind of gives me an indicator of where we're going in the future when it comes to some of this technology. So I wanted to jump in and talk about these different ones. A few of these I haven't told Dee about yet because I wanted to get his raw feedback on them. And then some of them him and I have discussed. So the first one I have not mentioned to Dee yet, and I wanted to get his opinion because he's an audiophile and he's very interested in headphones. He's got many, many, many versions of them. And as we've mentioned before, we both worked at NASA in different labs focusing on audio and visual and stuff. So there's a great deal of interest there. So at CESD this year, Novetto released what's called the Invisible Headphones. So it gives you live audio in front of you only in your space, but no one else can hear it that's standing around you. So when you're sitting in front of this device, and this device is probably like the size of like a media bar that you would buy that you put underneath your television, and it tracks where your head is moving, and it works with Alexa, and it's only projecting sound in a small bubble. So if you're sitting in front of your computer and you're working, you can hear the music, but the second that you move out of the space, you can't hear anything. What do you think about this idea?
I think it's pretty interesting, and I saw this, and I was reading up on it a little bit. And
You did? Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, obviously, I haven't heard it yet. And when it comes to CES, a lot of it was done remotely this year. Like, a lot of people attended without actually going to Las Vegas and going to the convention centers. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have been writing about it without actually having heard it. So they're basing what they're reporting on kind of what the claims are. Yeah. So it is one of the things where it's really interesting. Like, I'm very curious on how they achieved this. Like, a lot of people are using kind of waveguides and things in order to shape sound, but the beamforming of audio in order to create a bubble is, I mean, we know that audio, like sound waves in general, they move line of sight, right? They can be blocked by things. They continue to move through straight into the space. So I don't exactly know how they're dampening the audio, like, behind you, right? It makes a lot of sense that like to the left or right they can't hear you, but if someone's like sitting behind you, like if you're back to back to someone at a in an office area, like I don't know how they're achieving it so that the bubble isn't just it's not creating a a line of sound and more of a bubble of sound. So it's really interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, like who is this experience for, right? Is it just for people? I mean, my assumption would be for people who just don't want to wear headphones.
Yeah, I mean headphones can. I mean they can be hard on your ears. They can be hard on your head. They can be uncomfortable. They can be usually if you're in an office space where you're worried about other people hearing, hearing your audio, then you have to wear a closed back, which introduces more heat and all these kinds of things. And you get resonances. People get headaches, or they can if they're sensitive to it. So it kind of makes sense. You can get kind of localized audio without having to deal with like something on your head. And if somebody has like certain type of hair or something like that, it can get in the way. So it's interesting. Like I need to hear it. That's one thing, and the other
Yeah.
thing is like I need to hear. I need to be around somebody else hearing it too, because they're saying it's 90% sound reduction by being a meter away, about 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that seems very, very similar to to being near somebody wearing open back headphones.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the HD600s we used to listen to at NASA,
Yep.
but it was it's 90% reduction 3 feet away, but it's still like 89% like from 5 feet away, and it's enough to be distracting. You're almost better off just like putting on speakers and putting on music that everybody can enjoy together than like one person hearing a little bit of somebody else's music, even if you like that music, because then it's distracting, and then maybe like another like 5 feet away somebody else has some other music going on. So like it's not as good as a closed back headphone would be.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough sound leak that it's going to be distracting, or it could be distracting. I need to hear it.
Oh,
And then,
absolutely.
like, as a listener, I'm curious, like, are they going to get like stereo audio going on, or is this like mono coming out? Like, are
Yeah.
your ears going to be hearing different things? Can you do things like imaging and stuff like that in soundstage? Soundstage theoretically could be really good. That's um, how much of a sense of space you get from the audio.
Uh-huh.
And then like noise, there's lots of questions going on, but the technology itself sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember? I mean, first of all, let me tell our listeners there's a place that used to be around here. I think they recently closed the last one called Fry's Electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I believe they had some in the East Coast. I don't remember, D, or was it just the West Coast? Maybe it was just the West Coast. But anyway, it was the place where we would go, other than Radio Shack, a long time ago, to buy anything that was technology related. I mean, these stores were humongous, like the size of a Walmart,
Yeah.
and you would walk through and you could buy from electronic components to soldering irons to computers to refrigerators. I mean, everything. And you and I would go and we'd just roam around, look at stuff. It was really
Yeah, I would
fun.
hang out there. They had
We
coffee shops and stuff.
coffee shops and lunch and all that stuff. I don't know if you recall, D, but there was the one in San Jose, which was near your house. When you would walk in, there were certain places where they would have those domes and they were
Mhm.
hanging from the ceiling, and it would say walk into the dome, and you'd walk into the dome, and the dome was, I don't know, maybe like 2 feet in diameter. And when you walk underneath it, you would hear all this amazing music that you can listen to from the catalog because they would sell
Yeah.
CDs and stuff. And the second you walk out of the dome, you don't really hear anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what this is kind of doing here, right? It's trying to create like that audio space, but not
Hmm.
necessarily make it so that you have to wear headphones. And I feel like it fits a certain group. I don't know if it's like a mass market product, but it definitely seems like it's something that some people would enjoy at work.
Yeah. I think it's really, especially if you introduce. We were working with a company a while ago that was doing a lot of kind of I forget the term for it now, but it was like sound gating, so that if there was sound on one side of the office, it wouldn't travel to the other side of the office.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
You remember that stuff?
Yep.
Forget the name of the technology, but if you combine those two, that could be really interesting, right? Uh, because then it would drop off kind of like how much sound interference or sound noise pollution you're getting within that space. but there's also, it kind of reminds me of one of the most interesting implementations of this concept of kind of this transmission of sound is, I don't know if it was the last time you were at the Exploratorium in San Francisco,
It's been a
but
while, yeah, before COVID.
yeah, they have, at least they used to have these little pods where you would sit in them, and it's would have like a curved surface around you, and then somebody else would sit in another one, and it was like 20, 30 feet away from you, and you could have a conversation with them at normal volume because it was the thing that you were sitting in, the little pod that you were sitting in, was kind of shaping your audio and directing it like a flashlight at the person on the other
I
side.
see. Uh-huh.
So like you could sit there and you'd have like a quick conversation and you'd hear their voice, and then they're like 20, 30 feet away from you, and you hear their voice like they're right next to you. And it's amazing what you can do with shaping the sound in order to do that. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a cool concept. I'm interested to see kind of where it goes and if anyone else kind of picks this up. I know that they said it was patented and proprietary technology, but
mhm,
hopefully we get a chance to try it out. The next one, which has gotten a lot of press, and actually seen this type of stuff before, but not at this kind of degree, which was the
mhm,
BMW concept car. Has the ability to change its color on demand. Right now, it's using e-ink technology, so it's going between black and white and possibly shades of gray. And it can really help with heat efficiency, like turning the car
mhm.
white on a hot day, turning it black on a colder day. But really, what I saw from this was something that all of us have wanted for like a really long time, in two forms. One was the ability to change the color of your car based on how you feel that day. You walk out, look at your phone, tap a color, boom, changes it. You have a red car, a blue car, a yellow car. I mean, how neat and fun would that be? Just purely for entertainment purposes of being able to like change things up. And then second of all is applying this technology into wall paint so that in
Mhm.
your home you could just say, I don't want a white wall anymore. Today I want a red wall, or today I want a yellow wall, whatever it is, and just tap that color on your phone and suddenly your walls change within your home. Right. So I kind of feel like this is the beginning of people really pushing the envelope of how to do this so that you can have a a richer and more interesting kind of environment or experience for yourself.
So my question, I have questions. My first question is, does it need to be constantly powered in order to maintain the color?
So it did not say specifically for the stuff that I read, but I would imagine yes. But as you know as well as I do, the e-ink requires almost zero. I mean, it's like nothing.
Yeah,
It's like
very
such a small
little.
amount that it could be based on solar, right? So if you put solar panels in the car, things like that, then
Hmm.
it does that. The other question really that comes up is like, if someone crashes into your e-ink car, like what does it take to replace that, right?
Yeah. Well, you're gonna laugh. Can you guess what my knee jerk reaction to hearing about this technology? Like what is gonna come up in my mind as the first use case?
Oh, thieves are going to use it so that they can rob a bank or something and then drive off and change the color of the car and then the police can't find them.
Oh, you know me so well. I was like, oh my god, like bank robbers and getaway drivers would love this, and cops would hate it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, that's very niche, and I'm sure they're not going to spend that much money on like a BMW with with this kind of technology in it for that. I mean, by its nature, those cars need to be disposable for them. But I think it's really interesting. I don't like the idea of like changing color and stuff is kind of seems like a nice to have and stuff. But if you can use this technology to put a display just about anywhere, even if it's like a really low fidelity
Oh, yeah.
kind of thing of just like you wake up in the morning and you're walking around and like you get a notification, and instead of having to pull out your phone or even look at your watch, it just shows up on a surface that your eyes are already nearby.
Hmm.
That that is really really convenient and really interesting.
I think we're at the precipice of some really new stuff because
Yeah.
this stuff, I had a little insight into some of this stuff like 10 years ago when people were trying to figure out how to do this so that you can like layer these real thin screens like on your walls and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Everyone wanted the roll up monitor,
Hmm.
remember? I
Hmm.
feel we're kind of like right there. Like there's a use case there, an experience there that's going to tip everything over the edge. And then the technology is kind of almost already there. And I think we're going to see it. We're going to see it unfold in the next probably like 2 to 3 years. I think there's going to be some really neat stuff that comes out, like what you're talking about. I mean, imagine if you were able to measure your wall and then get this stuff, and then this stuff layers so neatly over your wall, it doesn't even look like it's on your wall, right? And
Yeah.
then, like you said, you get up in the morning and your notifications are on the whole entire wall or something. I mean, that'd be kind of neat. It's like, call this person or this, do this. These are my tasks for the day. And then you could just be like, disappear. And then suddenly the wall cleans itself up.
Yeah.
I think that there's some really neat stuff in the pipeline. And you can even see this, if you think about it, you can even see this stuff being used in schools. Like, there's so many use cases for this. So
Yeah.
I love that BMW did this. And I think that, even if they don't do it across the entire car, maybe they'll do it on a part of the car at some point. Like, meaning, like, maybe the next version
Yeah.
comes out and it's like, oh, it does the running boards or something, and you can change the color of your running boards or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if it was just on the trim on your car and you can modify it for certain situations, that would be really interesting. And if you could do the interior, like a dashboard,
Uh huh.
especially if you can bring up, simple display stuff, that would be really fascinating.
Yeah. All right. So the next one that we have here that I had found, which I thought was awesome, because you and I had this conversation before, I think actually on the podcast, about similar technology. This is called the a Singlid, I think is the company, a Singlid smart bulb. And basically, this bulb that you can replace and put inside of like a chandelier, or a light that is in a room, or there's different ways in which I'm sure you have to apply it. But the bulb itself uses radar type technology to monitor the health of a room, such as heart rate and things like that, with the goal of potentially helping the elderly with fall detection. Can you imagine going to like a grandmother's house or something like that and being concerned because maybe they live alone or something like that, and all you have to do is change a light bulb, and that light bulb connects to your smartphone, and that light bulb monitors whether or not someone fell down, or whether or not someone's heart stopped, or any of those types of things. You don't have to have big fancy devices in there. It's just simple. It's just a bulb. That's it. And it can do that type of monitoring. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's a way to provide kind of biometric data to the user, or, if it's an elderly user, it might be like the user's family,
Uh-huh.
without using cameras and microphones and things that can be a
Yep.
little bit more like contextually invasive, like, oh, let's see what so and so is saying about me, kind of stuff. It's really interesting. I'm curious about what kind of radar is floating around for a few reasons. One of them is interference with like
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or any other kind of radio transmissions that could be going on through the area, because you don't necessarily want to interfere with those, especially for, I
Uh-huh.
imagine these are Wi-Fi enabled devices. The other obviously is, people are going to respond and say like, whoa, okay, you're basically bouncing radiation off me full time in order to monitor me. Like, how is that going to affect my health? So I think
Yeah.
people are going to
I,
need
I
to get reassured in that area.
Sure, sure. And I'm sure that's top of mind, obviously, for
Hmm.
when they're trying to build these things. But like, it started with like, let's just put cameras in people's houses, and then it became cameras that don't require power. I mean, that require that you can put a battery in and it lasts like a year, and then it turned into like cameras that can move and track, somebody who's living alone or whatever. And then it just keeps evolving, and it's like to get to a
Hmm.
point where it's like, wow, you just changed this smart bulb, and suddenly we can kind of have a general idea of what's happening, or if a big event occurs, or gosh, I mean, imagine it for security, right? If
Yep.
someone breaks a window, the bulb just picks it up and says, "Hey, there's a large crash just happened in the house. Check it
Hmm.
out." Right? It's just another nail in the coffin when it comes to being able to properly secure your house the way that you feel comfortable securing your house. Not everybody wants a camera inside their house. Like I
Yeah.
don't. Like I don't have a camera like pointing in my house. I have sensors, but like I don't, in particular, personally, don't want a camera watching me all the time. I feel like it's weird.
Yeah. And most people I've known who do have cameras, and I have had cameras set up like from time to time, but like most people don't find that the a camera out there capturing full time is really that useful. It's really about like the handful of seconds or minutes in which something is actually happening that they need to have captured. So
Yeah.
you can imagine even one of these paired with something else, because with the type of, I also looked at this a little bit, this technology, and read up on it a little bit because it seemed interesting. With biometrics like heart rate and respiratory rate and things like that, you can establish kind of signature per person. Like everybody has a slightly different heart rate and respiratory rate and those kinds of things. So you can identify like, hey, this is someone who doesn't live here who's in the house, and that could potentially trigger cameras to capture. Like, okay, you don't need these cameras running all the time. It's only when the smart bulb picks up something of interest that needs to be captured. Uh, the other thing that's really interesting is for pets. So elderly, right? You want to keep track of your elderly, but like I have cats, you've had cats, and a lot of people out there have other animals like dogs or like if they have other like birds or things like that. It's sometimes hard to tell when they aren't feeling that great, right? Dogs are more expressive, but cats in particular are hard to zero in on, like when they're having health problems. So something like this could capture, hey, your cat needs to go to the vet and get checked out because something sounds weird, or their behavior is acting different. Something like that, I think, would be really interesting implementation for this kind of technology.
We always talk about how like things need to evolve naturally over time, and that's kind of the way these things work. Is like typically when you build something like this, you want it to work really really well doing one or two things, and
Mm-hmm.
then over time you start to add to it. Like when the Tesla first came out, it didn't actually have some of the features that it has now for pets, like you're talking about. And one of the features that it heard from its users it really wanted was a climate control system internally if the pet is left in there. And it wants to let anyone who's looking through the window know from the outside that the pet was not left alone and in a dangerous situation. So the screen on the Tesla says, "Hi, my owner had to go run into the store for a minute or something." It says on there, "I am fine, and this cabin is climate controlled." Right? It's like a lot of these things that are being created with software. So like if you can get the hardware portion of the smart bulb kind of worked out, then you can start to add tons and tons of different permutations via software over time. And that's what makes me most excited about this stuff is like we're finally coming to the age of robotics and the blending of like old and new technology together to like solve real problems. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
makes all this stuff. I don't know. I get excited about this stuff. I always get excited at CES anyways, even if it's stuff that like I wouldn't use. I just like seeing how people push themselves to make stuff that we
Yeah.
think we might need.
Well, I think for this, we've been talking about it for quite a while for the Internet of Things to be focused on, or part of it is increasing awareness through the prevalence of sensors and communicability between devices. But when you have a lot of data, it's one of the biggest challenges is focusing your the attention or the attention of an automated system on the data that you want it to focus on and not getting drowned out by all the other noise that's going on.
Uh-huh.
And something like this, where the sensor itself can be a little bit more targeted to things that are of interest rather than just capturing everything and then applying filters on the back end, this can simplify that dramatically because you don't necessarily want it hearing the words that you're saying or seeing the things that you're doing. You just want to know, like, oh, hey, somebody's got a heart arrhythmia, or oh, you didn't sleep very well last night, or those things of real interest.
I have a question about that. Your opinion on this is that there's this fine line between I'm being monitored and I'm kind of given basic health information that could be useful to me, and also uh, creating anxiety. And I wondered what your thoughts are on this because right when you said that, and then I was also thinking about the light bulb and the monitoring. Is that like everyone's trying to walk this line where they're like, hey, here's this information. It could be useful. Hopefully, this helps you stay healthier, live longer. But at the same time, if I'm telling you all the time, like, hey, you didn't sleep very well. Hey, I noticed your heart skipped a beat, or those types of things, do you think it also creates anxiety and makes it less attractive because you feel kind of nervous all the time that you're being checked on all the time? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's one of the things that needs to get dialed in as far as the user experience design. It needs to not be intrusive and create anxiety. It needs to be more focused on, like, all right, these are the things that are actually actionable. Maybe a few things every now and then that are like, oh, hey, warning, this could turn into something.
Uh huh.
But like, you don't necessarily want this thing up in your face and constantly like reminding you that you're mortal, right?
Yeah, that's true. You want it to be something that just kind of generally says, "Hey, you might want to think about this or that," right? Um,
Well, imagine, for example, right? You've had cats before. Like, hey, where did my cat go? Did my cat get out? Oh,
yeah,
let me take a look inside. Like, nope, cat did not get out. It's hiding under this couch over here.
I 100% agree with you. Like basic information like that. I mean, even like tracking tags and things like that have been so helpful for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I use the Apple tracker for a couple different devices, and it's so nice to know, like, oh well, this isn't here. Let me just check on my phone where it's at. Oh, I know
Mm-hmm.
where it's at. Okay. So yeah, there is. I understand there is a balance that's on there. A couple other things that I picked up on. One of them was called Roborock. So and I think our listeners know by now how much I love my Roomba. I have had the same Roomba since 2010 or 11. The
Oh
same
wow,
one running all the time. I just clean it, replace the parts every once in a while, and it keeps going. It's been like 11 years. And
wow.
it's fantastic. I mean, it just sucks up all the little dirt on the ground, cleans really well. Like, I really enjoy it. Well, Roborock is not a Roomba. It's a type of Roomba, another brand, but it does a lot. And it's really expensive. It's like $1,400.
Wow.
But it not only vacuums, but it also scrubs and washes the floors. It uses cameras to prevent collisions and falling off little, steps and things like that the old Roomba struggled with a little bit. It empties its own dustbin, cleans its own mop brushes, and knows when to do all this on its own. So it's like you don't even have to go in and press the clean button or not. It just does everything. It's like
Mm-hmm.
next level cleaning. And I saw this and I was like, this would be pretty rad. And the reason is because I don't mop my floors like all the time. I have hardwood floors. I wipe them down and things like that. But you can probably set all that stuff. So you're like, oh, I want you to clean my floors once a month. And then maybe just brush them on this month and clean everything out and send me a text when the garbage bin is full and I need to dump it. And that's it. And it just constantly takes care of your home. And I feel like that's where we're going, right? We're getting to the point where the robots are working for us and we're not having to put a lot of effort in order to keep them doing a job that we could get done faster, right? Instead, we just
Mm-hmm.
kind of leave the house, we come back, and we go, wow, floors look great, look fantastic, everything looks good, right? And you kind of roll with it. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't actually know that much about the Roombas of the world because I just haven't taken that leap yet. So one of my immediate questions is because I believe you can schedule cleanings with the Roomba, and I believe I believe they have versions that can actually scrub and wash your floor, like basically mops your floor for
They
you.
do, yeah.
So what is drill down for me on this? What exactly is the difference between this model and
Mhm.
like a top of the line Roomba?
The difference between this and the top of the line Roomba is this does everything in one. So if I wanted to get a mopping function, then I have a different type of Roomba that would mop and scrub my floors. This
Oh,
one
okay.
is
So you have.
actually doing the vacuuming, mopping, scrubbing, self cleaning of brushes, dumping of the material. Like normally, right now, I stop my Roomba, I open it up, I clean it all out after it's done running.
Hmm.
Right. Instead, this cleans itself out.
Well, I was looking at it, and because I've been thinking about buying one of these for a while, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. And I've seen some that have their own. They empty themselves into a
Hmm.
dustbin.
Yeah, yeah, that's like
Uh,
the newest feature, but I
okay.
haven't seen one that actually does every one of the things together. Like
Okay.
so, but it's $1,400. I mean, you're talking. I think the Roomba that I got was like actually it was kind of expensive, but it was like $499. I think when I bought it, maybe
Hmm.
it was $399. I bought it at like Costco or something. So 1,400 is 2 to 3 times the price. But if you do need to have your floors scrubbed and washed and all that kind of stuff done on a regular basis, and you want to give it a shot, it might be worth it. I mean, if you think about how much it costs to have someone come and clean your house all the time.
Well, you know what this makes me think about is imagine if they took all the functionality of this, like it really cleans your house. It creates like a map of your surfaces to clean. But you combine this with that Amazon Astro and
Hmm.
all the things that can do. That is a really compelling machine at that point.
Well, I think that's where it's going, right? If you think
Yeah.
about these different companies, each company tends to develop a robot that has a different function on it. And
Hmm.
at some point, somebody is going to nail it and they're going to have all the things on it. Like one of the things that was released that I'm not talking about today that was released at CES was, and everyone was really excited about it, was simply a tray that follows you around the house. So if you have mobility issues, it's just a little tray and it zips around and it can grab stuff off the counter and put it on its own tray and follow you around and help you out. Um, People loved it because they said it was really, really simple and solved one problem, which is people with mobility issues can't carry a bunch of stuff, especially heavy stuff. So
Hmm.
if this tray just follows you around and carries stuff for you, really helps your life out. I think the real genius of robotics will come when you have a robot in your house that does 5, 6, 7 things that you don't prefer to do, and it does them really, really, really well all the
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
consistently. And that could even be like changing your cat litter, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, if you imagine you've got basically the Robo Rock um, robot for cleaning your floors, and then you add like an Astro on top of it for bringing you a beer or being your security guard or taking pictures for you so you can take selfies with it and all those kinds of things. Or calling grandma on a video call. Just put those together. I mean, you're like 80% to an R2D2 at that point.
You are, yeah. And that's
Yeah,
the reason why I think,
just needs to be able to repair my car.
yeah, well, at some point, right? It's like all these things are slowly get. I saw a machine that massages you, like you lay down and the arms come out from underneath the table, and then they hit all the pressure points, and
Oh,
you can, right? Think about this,
so it's
right?
the evolution of the massage chair.
It is. It is. Remember, you and I always wanted a massage chair when we first started the
Yeah, I never
business.
actually got one.
We never got one. I feel like we should reward ourselves and get a massage chair. Do they?
We
We'd have to
should.
find
We
out where
should.
they sell them because we saw them at Sharper Image.
Are there sharper images anymore? Or are those
I don't think
gone?
so. No, I
Yeah.
think it's
Well,
a catalog now, but
well, after the pandemic, when if we get another office again, then we should. One of the first things we should get is a massage chair.
just two massage chairs and a desk in between us, so you can literally be massaged the whole time you're working.
There you go.
That's how to do it. But no, I really do feel this way. I do feel like we're getting close. I mean, some of these things. I mean, if you figure Roombas and the ones that the company that makes Roombas and stuff, everything that they've done has been great. Like it works really well. It doesn't break. Batteries last a long time. Charging units are good. Very durable, right? And these other companies are kind of catching up and adding features. And then you look at like what Amazon's doing with their little robot, of like being able to have a camera or the one that flies
Hmm.
around your house and checks your house if you feel like you could left something on. We're dancing around the idea that at some point one thing will do 5 or 6 things and
Yeah.
everyone's gonna want it.
Yeah, and then we'll have the robot uprising, and then we can welcome our new robot overlords,
Exactly, right?
which
And
will be
and
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you and I have been waiting for this our whole lives.
yeah.
All right, here is the last one that I had, which I thought you might be interested in, because you are definitely more of a gamer than I am. TP Link developed a movable antenna router, which you actually had mentioned to me like 10 years ago. You're like, I wish that the antennas would kind of self-adjust so they can find the best signal, because if you live in an apartment or you live in houses that are really close to each other, a lot of times you'll have to go in and actually change settings and stuff because there's crosstalk and there's all kinds of little things that come up with these routers.
Hmm.
So this one is kind of cool. It's like the antennas continually throughout the day are moving and just trying to grab the best signal. And so I thought that was like a neat technology to solve a common problem.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like other technologies have already kind of addressed a lot of this. Like if you have a Wi-Fi 6 multi-band mesh router, like I do, and I think you do too, because that's becoming the new standard, then they're already kind of addressing a lot of this without having like moving parts. So I think it's interesting. I wonder, like, what is the degree of improvement over like something like that, where by switching by having it multi-band, you can just switch to different bands in order to get around the crosstalk on a certain radio frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and by being it mesh, then it's now like reaching all throughout the house without having to have those old signal repeaters that we used to use that were terrible.
This is like one layer feature, one extra feature, right? Because even if you have the
Mhm.
mesh network, I'm sure the mesh network still struggles with some of these things as well. right? It's
Sure.
just happened
Yeah.
internally. We don't really see it as much. So I think this is kind of that next step of like, well, I don't have a mesh network, which is quite expensive. And I just have this router, but the router will constantly adjust itself and it can help me out. Like, I mean, I imagine if you put this in a dorm room, it would really work well because dorm rooms tend to have a lot of crosstalk because
Hmm.
they don't all provide internet into the rooms. Some people are building their own routers and all that kind of stuff, and you get a lot of that crosstalk happening.
No,
So
yeah.
so this is kind of a cool device. I don't know. We'll see how it works. I mean, I haven't tried it, but it did look pretty cool, just from visually seeing the demonstration of how
Yeah,
it
I'm very
functions.
curious about it. Do you know how much it costs?
No, that's one thing I did not look up was cost on this one. Um, it's going to be expensive when it first starts, right? But
Yeah.
but yeah, we can we
Well,
can we can
yeah.
try.
The other question is because it's got motors and it's got moving parts. This is one of the things I was thinking about when we brought it up a long time ago. I was like, but yeah, then it's got motors, which means it's going to need maintenance, and all those, the motors are eventually going to fail and those kinds of things. So I wonder, like, to what extent that can become an issue for people.
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to search it actually while we were talking here just for a second. If there was a cost on there, don't see it off the top of my head, but I'm gonna guess it's probably going to be at least in the couple $100 range. Would be
Yeah.
my guess. But yeah, so it was cool. So CES, based on what I saw, had some pretty interesting things, and a lot of these I picked out because I watched a lot of videos of people who attended it and walked around, with their masks on and all that stuff, and would show
Hmm.
these things, and then I just wrote down the ones that I thought were kind of interesting and kind of giving us an indicator that we are heading in the direction of things taking care of itself. This is
Hmm.
something that I think for a long time, a lot of IT people and tech people have really enjoyed, which is like watching technology get to a point where the technology takes care of itself. Like
Yeah.
when there's a problem with a server, a router, a anything, it says, "Oh, there's a problem." I'm not going to just inform the user. I'm actually going to solve the problem for them, and then let them know I solved the problem.
Yeah.
Right? And we're kind of at that phase.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point where we can get to some self-repairing equipment. I saw a video of it was actually kind of horrifying, but also really interesting, where a robotics arm was given a oil leak, like a fluid leak.
Uh huh.
I think it was like some hydraulic fluid. And in order for it was running on an AI system which was instructed to gather the leaking fluid and basically funnel it into a system that collected it and reinserted back into the arm. And it was kind of tasked with keeping itself alive because if it didn't capture enough fluid, then it would cease to operate. So like
I see.
it had the feel a little bit of like we're torturing this machine, if it was alive, of like, oh hey, you're bleeding out and you've got to get your blood back into you, and if you don't go fast enough, you're going to die.
Uh huh.
But at the same time, it demonstrated an ability to have some self repair, which would be awesome, right? It's just self repairing car.
I do believe that we're heading in that direction, and this is an exciting time. It's also a really
Mhm.
exciting time for people who are just getting into their careers and are interested in technology because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And speaking of a lot going on, I'd love to transition to our second and final topic of the day, which is the metaverse real estate boom. So, over the winter break, I was doing some research and reading a lot. Wall Street Journal put out some articles and stuff, and everyone's talking about the metaverse because of um, I almost said Facebook, but Meta's headset and push
You
into
can
the
keep calling it
metaverse.
Facebook.
I know exactly. I'm going to call them Facebook. Um, and then I started going deeper and deeper and deeper. And what I realized is that a lot of venture cap firms are dipping their toes, or some of the smaller ones going all in on this virtual real estate buying. So basically, buying land, quote unquote, land from decentralized platforms such as Sandbox and Decentraland. And there's many more of them as well. Now, the big thing to understand about this is that the reason why they're interested is because it's decentralized. The
Hmm.
fact is that one day it's a lot harder, let's put it this way, to just one day say, oh, this didn't work out, this company didn't work out called Decentraland, and just shut it off, right? Instead, it's like the users kind of own this experience. They own this second life, so to speak, without using the name of something that actually already exists. But they own this, And the firms are seeing this as well as other wealthy individuals. They said a lot of wealthy individuals who did well over the last 5 years on the crypto boom, like bought into crypto, are now looking at like, what's the next big opportunity? So here's what it is. So when you go into these platforms like Sandbox and Centraland, they're entire worlds that were built, and you can go in and find plots of land and buy those plots of land. You can either buy them directly from the platform, I believe, or you can actually buy them from individuals who had already purchased them a long time ago and are reselling those plots of land. When you buy those plots of land, you can build whatever you want on them. It's not like the real world where you have to get permits and this and that. They have regulation on certain things you can and cannot do, but definitely much easier. And so what these firms are doing is they're hiring real architects. And I actually met an architect who said they got a proposal for one of these. Is that they're real architects. They will draw out drawings for a brand new building. It could be a retail mall. It could be a mansion on a hill. It could be a warehouse, whatever it is. And they design these as if they're designing the real thing. Then they worked closely with game designers in order to implement these architectural designs in this virtual world so that the thing that you're seeing looks real. It looks just like if it was being built down the street. And the reason why they do this is because one is they think over time the value of this value of this property will go up. But also when you build like a retail mall in the virtual world, you can lease out individual stores to people who are selling products. So this is like the next frontier of retail sales. So one example they had on there was that somebody who owned a retail mall had a retail space they lent out to a fashion designer who sells avatar skins and accessories. So that person goes into this little space, they put in a bunch of furniture, they put their avatar skins and accessories in there, and they basically put them up for sale. And as people in the metaverse cruise into this experience, let's say on Decentraland, they can walk in, they can use Ethereum or other or Decentraland's Mana, I believe it is, and make purchases of these avatar skins and accessories and things that they can use for their own experiences. And so my question to you is knowing that this is happening, and this is happening fast and big. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars are being spent on plots of land. Do you feel like this is the next frontier for retail sales? Do you like this is like the beginning of like the web when we first started saying, oh, I'm going to sell it on the internet, and people would laugh at you. They say they're not going to go and buy it off your website. They're going to go to the store and buy it.
Well, I mean, this is something different, right? Because you're not buying, sweaters and socks, and then have them delivered to you. You're buying virtual plots of land, so you're buying bits of data that. One of the issues that I have with where we are right now in kind of these decentralized platforms is they're basically using hybrid models. So the decentralized part of this is the ledger, which is keeping track of who owns what. But the platforms are that are creating these virtual environments, that are rendering them, that are providing all of that, are running on centralized platforms still, because the blockchain isn't there yet where it can just run a virtual environment server in its entirety. So in order to access a lot of this property that you're buying, this virtual property, you're dependent on somebody else running a server, and that server cost money. So that person is running it at cost. That whoever's running that server needs to be making revenue in order to kind of cover their costs and ideally make a little bit of a profit for themselves in order for it to be worth their time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what happens if you buy up a bunch of Decentraland land, and then Decentraland goes the way of GeoCities and it's replaced by something else, and you're kind of stuck with an investment that you can't access. So that's one thing right now I'm worried about, is just like, I imagine when this stuff kind of matures, people will be buying things. People have been buying virtual property for quite some time now. They've been paying real money for it. I remember giving a talk on this for World of Warcraft, where people are paying real money for like weapons in the game, unique weapons within the game. Mm-hmm. And that was, 12 years ago. You didn't need a blockchain in order to enable purchase of digital things. It's just the idea of um, NFTs essentially creating this scarcity because it is, or at least it's supposed to be a unique item. You could still make a copy of it. It's just not the NFT backed copy of it.
Mhm.
Uh, then, what happens if the servers on which they're run get shut down?
I see. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that need to be worked out for sure. But
Hmm.
assuming that a lot of that stuff can be worked out, and it's like anything, right? When you first start, there's going to be lots of little issues, problems, gray areas. And over
Sure.
time, you slowly resolve them. And eventually you look back and go, wow, that thing actually happened. Uh, I mean,
Although to be fair, like the plan is for this all to get moved into Web3, so everything's decentralized. So it's
uh
not running on a server that's just going to get shut down. It's running on a variety of different devices distributed throughout the world. But until we get there, it's kind of like this uncanny valley for me, especially when you take into account the amount of money that people are investing into stuff that can get rug pulled.
Yeah, no, I think it can. I think that finding legitimate sources to do this, I think the places where these investors are going, like
Hmm.
Decentraland and Sandbox and stuff like that. I mean, these are the more well known ones, right? This is like the bigger entities. There's definitely smaller places where this can happen, and you can definitely get in trouble. I feel like what's interesting to me is that we're getting to a point where it's possible to have a life and to make money and to do all those types of things in a virtual environment on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Like you don't have to wake up after college, let's say, for example, this is just an example. You get out of college and let's say you're an engineering major or something else. And you're like, you know what? I think I want to like build a retail store and be in the
Hmm.
metaverse and promote my own products and that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting to think that like if there's a market for your avatars and your skins and your things like that, that you can actually have your own retail presence around the world in a virtual world that doesn't require you to like monitor it all the time. You can make great money. Some of these people are making millions and
Hmm.
have a life and it's not tied to the same script or whatever that everyone else has been kind of building on for the last 30 years, right? It's to me it's giving me a
Hmm.
glimpse into how the younger generation might be thinking about a lifestyle.
Well, I mean, so I have issues with it for a few reasons. Number one, people have been doing this independent of the blockchain for over a decade now, right? You
Yeah.
can you can go into you can go to Minecraft Season 7 for Hermitcraft and download their Minecraft world, which had a huge virtual shopping district. And none of that was built using blockchain. A lot of this was just like, and it's not even proprietary. You can just download it for free and go and check it out.
Yeah.
You're not buying real life goods, and you're essentially, I mean, you're paying a virtual currency to buy virtual goods that are only usable within this environment. And one nice thing about a setup like that is you can run it off of a home device without necessarily using a multiplayer server. So
Yeah.
you can just download it and run it on your home machine. So you can still access it if you have it. Part of it is, what from a user experience standpoint, right? One of the issues we have with real estate is the cost associated with it. So
Uh-huh.
if you want to have a really nice home especially in California where we live, it's going to cost you, a million plus in order to
Yeah.
have that home. And that's just a normal house. That's like a 1,500 square foot house. It doesn't cost you $1.5 million in Silicon Valley. Now, from the sounds of this, they're taking all of the downsides of home ownership and bring it into the virtual world,
Mhm.
which is now, if you want to own this home in the virtual space, it's going to cost you a couple $100,000.
Yep.
And it's just like you just took away the best part of this was just I can have a nice home and not have to worry about the financials of it.
Yeah.
On the backside, you could make money off it, but there's still uh, and a lot of that is smoothed out because you don't have to deal with mortgages. Hopefully, or insurance or those kinds of things. Although for something like this, maybe you should have insurance on it.
Yeah,
And if it's
exactly. I
going
was
to
thinking the
cost a
same
million
thing.
dollars, yeah, is there gonna be a whole like financial services model around this where you have
Oh,
to
you
go to
bet.
you have to
Oh,
go to
you
the
bet,
bank
D.
get a mortgage to buy your virtual property? That just seems like you're just creating more work for people. It
Well,
doesn't
you
sound
bet.
fun.
I mean,
Sounds like work.
if there's money to be made in a space
Hmm.
like this, you're going to see these things pop up. Virtual mortgages or whatever it is, right? Not probably right now, but maybe
Yeah,
years down the road when things are solidified and it's true that there is this whole second world where you can make money and do all these things and that kind of stuff, have a different life, have a beach hut and rent out surfboards or whatever you do in the virtual world, right? It's going to happen, like no matter what. I think it's just a matter of whether or not that's interesting enough for you to make that investment. I think you could still now get small plots and build your own little house somewhere and that kind of stuff for a reasonable price. But based on what I was reading, I mean these plots of land, I mean they're buying them surrounding oceans and waterfronts and everything, just like you would if you were buying something on the Hudson River or something.
yeah,
It's expensive and it's going up and up and up, and they're trying to
but
do a land grab
but
on it.
why does it need to be expensive? Like, why not make it cheap? It's the I mean, economics. If you get right down to what economics is the study of the distribution of limited resources.
Yep.
But within a virtual world, they're not limited. There's no scarcity. Like you're creating this sense of scarcity by having an NFT associated with these things.
Uh-huh.
But like you can just copy and paste and create like and that's the whole appeal. Is just like I can have whatever house I want, and it's not going to cost me an arm and a leg. I can just, and if I'm tired of that because it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg, I can just go build a new house that looks completely different. I can go from my house in the woods to a house on the beach. I can put one in the mountains. I can put one in a city. All of those kinds of things, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Now, if this was running on Web3 and you're buying, somebody put in all the effort in order to create like a virtual recreation of Falling Waters or something like that, or
Uh-huh.
like Hearst Castle, and it costs, $50, now we're talking, right? Now that's like the cost to value ratio is way, way closer to what you'd have because the only value in it is your enjoyment of that space. Now you can't grow food on it on that land.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no practical application to it. Like the I feel like to a certain extent the investor hype around this is really kind of killing off the technical or not killing off suppressing the technical advancement itself because
Hmm.
people are are not necessarily focused on the experience that's associated with it. They're focused on like, hey, I can use this to get rich. And I understand that a lot of the avenues for making money these days have been really cut off from what they were, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So people are desperate to find ways to like, hey, I want to alleviate my economic anxiety, and the only
Sure.
way to do that is to find some investments that I can actually get into, but it just feels like we're missing what the ultimate goal is going to be.
Yeah, and I understand. I mean, when you say there's no real value there, I mean, I think from an entertainment standpoint, I see value in the retail example they gave, right? Like I thought
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I really want a new avatar that I use, and let's say you have a central avatar and it can be used in all
Sure.
kinds of applications, and you put on your headset or not, let's say, and you jump in and you get to go shopping at the mall, and you're like walking around looking at each retail store and stuff. It could be fun. It could be exciting. I understand
Hmm.
that aspect of it. But I look at it and I do go, well, if you have to hire an architect in order to develop plans, in order to develop something that's really grand and beautiful, because it's not something that you and I can do right away. It requires some skill, from a
Hmm.
developer standpoint. Then it's costing you to build that asset, if we even call it an asset. But
Yeah.
it's costing you to build it. Now there's this inherent like feeling or need to like make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Which
And so,
I mean, and that makes sense, and that's why I thought, like, I would pay money to have a virtual copy of Hearst Castle, or a Solomar, or I don't know, the Louvre or something like that, or the International Space Station, so I
yeah.
can go and live in there virtually for a few hours a day, maybe for 6 months or something like that. That's not worth $100,000 to me.
If you fundamentally believed that that $100,000 thing would sell 3 years from now for 400,000, you might feel differently. You might be like, "Hey, I want to make that leap because I'm pretty sure based on the way I look at this scenario
Yeah,
that I can sell it later."
yeah, but that's not experience based. That's just that's just investment, right? There's no user experience to that.
Yeah, I mean it's an investment thing. I mean it always comes down to this, right? We're getting to the point where the majority of
Hmm.
things that are created and stuff are created because people want to try to do the both, right? They want to have an experience and it's fun, but
Hmm.
also be able to cash out at some point. And that's kind of what I hear with people who are getting into it now a little bit is they're like, "Hey, I'm going to buy something, have fun with it, and cross my fingers and hope that I can sell for double what I got for it." Right? And it's like, okay, it's like game on. Let's
That's
just see how
Yeah.
it goes.
Just economically, that's not usually how it works. I mean, some things hold their value very well
Uh huh.
and increase in value. Like if you go out and buy like a really nice car or something like that, if you go out and buy like a Bentley, it's going to hold its value, or a Rolls Royce, right? It's going to hold its value, but rarely do you. I mean, you're getting value out of it by you're extracting value from it from experiencing it, right? Because the experience of that vehicle, and then you sell it off, and hopefully it will have maintained that same value. But by kind of the nature of, like, if you think about value as like energy,
Uh huh.
then by extracting some value out of it, then you're kind of removing some value from it, and then you're selling it used, right? Which I do. Typically, when something is used, it goes down in value to some extent, and then you have some things that are better at maintaining their value than others.
Yeah.
But for something virtual that is infinitely replicable, like, again, a lot of this comes down to the price point, right? It's like if this was, $10, $50, $100 to buy a virtual piece of property that could then sell, and you can, maybe make a little bit of money out of it, it would be interesting. But like when you get into people paying $1 million for, you know, for something virtual, to me, that's just a bit out of line. Like there's not a lot of justification. Like when we moved off of the gold system into the current currency model,
Uh huh.
we ran into some issues with it not being based in something that's tangible. You just kind of lose that connection to the economics of the distribution of limited resources,
Hmm.
and then things kind of can get a little out of whack. And this is one area where, like, I feel like the hype is getting things out of whack. And it's also preventing it from being mainstream, right? You can't make this mainstream where everybody's buying $1 million on something. Can you imagine if your kid grew up, or your friend's kid, and was like, you know what, I'm not going to buy a home to live in. I'm going to buy this piece of property on virtually for $1 million, and then you know as long as nothing happens to the technology, and as long as over the next 10 years there isn't a major technological advancement that doesn't render this that doesn't suppress the value of this,
Hmm.
because we've now moved on to something else, then I can sell it for $4 million and buy a house to live in.
I hate to break it to you, D. It's already happening. I actually read an article about how some
Yeah,
of the younger generation said we're not going to be able to afford to buy a regular home because they're too expensive. I mean, we're getting to the point now where it's like, around here, for example, 1100 square foot home is about 1.7 million, right?
hmm
So because it's so expensive, we've decided to invest in the virtual world instead.
yeah, but I mean, at these prices, you can buy a home, like $1 million piece of property. I mean, for virtual property. Now, imagine you're at that point where it's like, oh, I could buy a real piece of property, or I can buy a virtual one where I don't have to deal with landscaping and maintaining and doing repairs,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I think when we get at that point, we're kind of And a lot of this value is like assuming that 10 years from now, there's not going to be like, a new model of those homes that are going to make the value of this obsolete.
It's true. It's true. I mean, we could probably go on and on because this is a nice, deep, interesting, and philosophical topic for our
Hmm.
first one back into season 5. I mean, I, I'll do my best. I haven't been able to find an expert in this space yet that I can actually get on the podcast. If you want to look as well, I think it'd be fun to talk to somebody who's actually like maybe even an architect about what their
Hmm.
perception is of like designing for the virtual world and what they're hearing from their customers and things like that. Because I feel like this is
Yeah.
a topic that could go pretty deep, and I worry that sometimes like my brain is just slightly old, like meaning like I'm not seeing it from the clarity of a young, enthusiastic person. You know what I mean? And instead, I'm seeing it from all of my history of what I learned, when the internet was coming up and what worked, what didn't, what was real, what wasn't.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like when I was growing up and I was like getting into the internet, I thought it was so cool that you can find all this information and build websites and do all these types of things. I was super stoked about it. People that were my age back then, I was talking to them and they just didn't get it. They're just like, I don't
Yeah.
understand why you care so much. And so it would be good if someone can wrap our heads around
Yeah.
their
Well,
perspective, especially a younger person.
I think if you had somebody who was an artist, and architecture is a form of art, right? So if you
Yeah.
had an architect or something like that who developed these amazing properties and sold them, instead of selling one of them for $1 million, sold a million of them for $10.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fantastic. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that our artists in society need other ways to make money because in so many ways they're kind of being ripped off for their work,
Oh yeah. And
or they're
actually
not being properly valued.
I've read a lot, D, about, and then we should probably wrap it up because we are kind of creeping over our hour mark here. But like, I have read a lot about how artists say they finally feel like now they can make money. They said we can
Yeah.
create our own art, convert it to NFTs, sell it to people, have smart contracts that are associated with it, have one of 100 or one of one. And they said we can really build a lifestyle where we could do both our physical art and then the digital art supports the physical art.
Hmm.
And they're really excited about it. So, I think that
Yeah.
there's a great opportunity here to enable art in just a new way.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. But I also worry that like when it starts being, basically centralized, where it's like, okay, you've got to buy this piece of art from this artist for $1 million, rather than kind of spreading it out across more artists and more individual pieces,
Uh-huh.
then it starts to kind of defeat its purpose to some extent, and it kind of creates. I think it's scaring people off. I think there's a lot of like, I think it's preventing it from going more mainstream
Yeah.
because people hear about these things and it's like, oh man, I don't want to have to pay $100,000 for this kind of thing.
Well, I'll tell you, D,
When
I'll make one last point, and that is that one of the things that's preventing this stuff from mainstream is if you've ever tried to sign up for one of these platforms and get involved in it, it's not the easiest thing.
oh
Like
yeah.
that's another thing, right? Yeah, like there's certain things you have to do, like you have to own Ether or Mana, you have to have a MetaMask account,
Hmm.
you have to have where's your wallet, where's your stuff being stored in the wallet. Like there's a lot still being worked out, and I think
Yeah.
that stuff is a major barrier of entry for the average person just jumping on and trying it out. And in the meantime, why those people are not jumping on and trying it out, investors are coming in and buying as much as they possibly can, which we see with lots of industries when they're new and emerging.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, I think this is a great place to stop because I think you and I could spend 3 hours talking about this stuff because we love it. But I want to thank everyone so much for taking the time to listen to us today. We really appreciate it. We'll be posting links to many of the sources that we reference on Twitter, so you can find us and follow us at Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast and the number one. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you all next week. And welcome to season 5.